guys, today I'm going to be going over an optional lesson if you have watercolors at home and you'd like to do a little something extra. I'm going to be painting some papers that I can use later for collage. So I actually already have one paper that I painted with watercolor too, but as you can see, there was an extra step involved. I cut up some scrap paper into smaller pieces, and for this one I used crayon first just to do some colorful designs and patterns. You can do that too if you want, but if you would rather just go straight to watercolor, that's okay too. I'm just going to go over how to set up your watercolor workspace and some good tips for making sure that you have a fun and successful time with your painting. Okay, let's get started. All right, let's get started. So first, to set up your watercolor space, you need a flat surface, a placemat to protect your table or your desk from the paint. You need a cup that's about half full of just water. You need a paper towel or a rag, and you need your brush, of course, and your paper. Mine is just a scrap that I cut in half, and you'll need your paint set. So I got this paint set because it looks similar to the ones we use in school, but if your paint set looks different from this, that is perfectly okay. All right, so I know my first example used crayon first, but for this one, I'm just gonna get right to painting. So I'm gonna get my brush nice and wet, and because I've already done some painting recently with this set, some of the colors are already like wet and active. So those you might be able to see, they look a little shinier. Some of these colors I haven't used yet, so I will need to add a little bit of extra water to those. Okay, I think I'm going to start with some of this green because it hasn't been used yet. So I'm going to get my brush nice and wet, and I'm going to gently stir into the green. I'm not digging down with my brush. I want to be gentle, and it's almost like how I would pet a dog or a cat, you know, not too hard. Okay, so my green looks nice and shiny and wet, and I can see there's green on the bristles of my brush. So I'm just going to paint a little section. And if I want it to look lighter, I could add more water. Like that. I do have white as part of my set. White is not always included in watercolor sets. I'm actually not going to use it, but if you have white and you want to make a mixture of a lighter color in your lid, feel free. But if I want it to look darker, I'm going to dry my brush on my rag, and I'm just going to get paint straight out of this little container without adding extra water. I'm just going to use the wetness that's already in it. And that'll get my green a little bit darker. Okay, so I'm going to switch colors. So I'm going to gently stir. I'm going to dab it dry on my rag. And your bristles on your brush, the little hairs, they should always look smooth and straight like this. If your bristles are sticking out in every direction and it looks a little crazy, it might mean your brush is dry and it just needs water. But it also might mean that when you are painting, you are pressing harder than you need to, because you never want to smash your brush all the way flat. You just want to kind of pull it along gently, no smashing. Okay, so my new color is going to be this sapphire blue. Uh-oh, I don't know if you guys can see that. I bet some of you know what the problem is though. Too dry. if your paint looks like that and it's getting really hard to paint a whole area and it's really scrubby and scratchy, add more water. You can just smooth it out directly on the paper, like that. Or you can add more water directly into the paint like this. Okay, so I've got some green, I've got some blue. I'll wash my brush and switch to maybe this light blue. That looks pretty. Okay, I'm gonna move my paper a little bit, but I wanna make sure it's still over the placemat so that I don't get paint on my table. Okay, we have a little bit left to paint. I think I want some orange. That's kind of a yellowy orange. And I'm going to make this corner red. Okay, and now I'm going to wash off my brush. And I'm going to leave this to let it dry. I could just leave it the way that it is and use it later. But I think what I'm going to do is I'll let it dry for like 15 minutes and then I'll come back to it with some more paint and I'm just going to do a couple of little designs over it just for fun. Hey guys, I'm going to go ahead and now that my paper is a little more dry, I'm going to just add some designs with the paint on top of it just to make it a little more interesting. I also changed out my water while I was waiting for it to dry just because it's always nice to work with fresh water. It'll make it much easier to keep your paints clean if you keep your water changed regularly. Okay, so if you want to do this, if you have a smaller brush, feel free to switch to your smaller brush. I do have a lot of different kinds of brushes, but I'm going to stick with the same kind of brush just because I want to show you guys that especially with a flat brush like this, you can actually get a pretty narrow line just by turning your brush sideways. Okay, so I definitely don't want to use a lot of water if I'm going to be making some small designs. If I use a lot of water, it's going to spread all over the place. So just a little water and not dripping. I'm just kind of gently rubbing it on the very edge of my cup to get the extra drips of water out. Okay, so I want to pick some colors that will show up against this. So for example, for the yellow, I probably won't want to do yellow on top of yellow because that wouldn't work at all. So I'm going to do some of this deep blue on the yellow, and I think I just want some little stripes. And you can see it's spreading a little bit on the edges, but for the most part it's staying pretty well contained. If you want to avoid any spreading, wait until your paper is completely dry. Mine is still a little bit damp, but I kind of like how it looks when it spreads a little bit like that, so I'm fine with it. Okay, now I'm going to clean off my brush and get rid of the extra water, and I want to pick something that's going to show up against this blue, so I think I'm going to do maybe some red. My red looks a little dry, so I'm just going to use a little extra water. Okay, and I'll do maybe like a wavy pattern on the red. Can you see that, especially in the middle here, the red is mixing with the blue because the blue is still a little wet and it's making purple. And I don't really have a plan for this. I just know that I'm going to be cutting it up later to make a collage anyway, so I'm not too stressed out about my designs. I just want to make different sections have different colors and different patterns, just so that there's something neat kind of going on in every part of this paper. Okay, I'll do a little bit of orange here. Maybe I'll do, ooh, I know, I have an idea. Do this kind of curvy pattern, like almost like a rainbow, but I want to do a bunch of them. Maybe I'll switch between like a reddish orange and a yellow orange. Okay, I think I might have room for one more of these little rainbows. Okay, and then I need something for this little green square and for that red square in the corner. I think I'm gonna do maybe just some polka dots in the green square. And maybe this emerald color. I'll just do diagonal lines here. Okay, so now that I'm done, I'm gonna let this dry all the way. I'm gonna clean my brush off, and for this kind of watercolor, just water is enough for cleaning your brush, although a little bit of hand soap is okay too. If you do use soap, what I like to do is put a little bit in my hand like this, and then I clean the brush right in my hand, and then I rinse it off and dab it dry. And I'm going to put this in my little cat cup. And before I put away my rag, I just want to check that my paint set looks okay. It looks like I didn't mix any colors, so I like to leave it open for a little bit to let it dry before I close it. And I'm going to go clean out my water container, and I'm all done for now. I hope you guys had fun.